Hey, what's up everybody? In this video we're going to be learning how to build a basic budget online using Google Sheets document, which is a a Microsoft Excel document, essentially Google style. Uh, to do this, you're going to go to Google Sheets. You can just Google Sheets and you'll click blank document. You obviously have some budget items you can choose from, but if you want to build it from scratch, you can choose blank document. And then you'll be presented with a blank spreadsheet as shown here. And so the first thing we're going to do is type in in item 1A up there, the year. So in this example, we'll use 2020, and I'm going to color code that green, and I'm going to make it bold. And to do so, it's pretty simple to do. You just click the cell that you want and click the color highlighting. Next up, we'll enter the months in the left column in the column A. And we'll start with January, the first month of the year, so we can keep it nice and simple and get a nice budget measurement from January to December of 2020. I'm going to use all capitals just to make things visually kind of stand out a little bit more. And you'll also notice in cell A2, I'm going to put a little entry there called Approximate Cost. And you'll see what that means in just a minute. But for now, let's just go ahead and enter the months in as shown. I'm also going to enter a cell called average and sum. So you can see that right there. I had it entered before, but just to show you kind of where I'm at, we'll do average and sum. Okay. Now, as far as the row 1, we're going to make that green as well, just to give it a little visual appeal. All right, so in your various columns, so column B, C, all the way to the end of the green there, column M, we're going to be entering our expense categories. So obviously house payment or rent payment will enter. Now interestingly, I'm going to put savings as an expense because philosophically I view savings as an expense. It's something that you should do first, and then anything left over you can spend. So I'm going to build in savings like an expense. For the purpose of this budget and just good savings practice in general. So I'm going to enter all of my expenses, as you can see here. And if you get paid twice a month, for example, you might want to consider entering two savings, savings 1 and savings 2, and kind of having them align with your paycheck. And you can switch these out or reorder them based on when they come up during the month or when your paycheck comes in during the month. I like to sequence them like that. So I'm going to enter my various expenses, and obviously you may have different expenses than me, but this is just an example. You can add more cells however you wish. So with these added, we're going to be entering a category called total expenses for the month. Okay, that'll be your final column there. So in column N, you can see I am adjusting it a little bit so it's just nice and clean. And you'll notice I'm going to wrap that text around. So when it hits the end of the cell, so for example, after the word for in column N, the word month drops down as opposed to just bleeding into the next cell. So that's what I'm doing here. You can see my cursor, which button I'm clicking on to do that. So once you have all your expenses entered, you're going to have 4 separate cells. So that is column N, O, P, and Q. And these last 4 columns are basically aggregate columns. They're going to give you some interesting numbers to see how much money you've paid in expenses and how much money you have left over at the end of each month. So with that entered, I'm just going to narrow those columns up a little bit. I want to have everything appear nice and neatly on one page. I don't want to have to scroll too much left or right. Obviously, if you're on a cell phone or a device, you'll have to be scrolling. But if I'm on a computer and I want to view this, I want it to appear in one nice clean page. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. All right, next up, now that I have all of my headings, all of my expenses entered, and my last 4 aggregate columns entered, I'm going to enter the approximate costs for each expense. So what costs are associated with which expense? So imagine your rent payment or your house payment is $800 per month. This is what you're going to what you're going to add. Now, this is kind of where the budgeting concept comes in, right? And I do recommend that you budget high as opposed to low. For example, if your gas and electric bill is constantly $75 per month, then round up and make it $100 a month in your budget. This way, the more conservative approach, you're more likely to have a little bit more cash left at the end of the month. So that's one strategy that I like to do. So I'm just going to enter, and you can use your best judgment for the first time around. You can adjust this later if you need to. It does not have to be exact by any means, but just kind of approximate costs per month based on the last month or two. So you might need to dig out your credit card statements or your bank statements and see kind of approximately how much money have you been spending on which category per month. Now the savings, you can obviously start with whatever is comfortable for you savings-wise. Start low and work your way up and save more if you can. Obviously you can start high and whittle that down if you need to, whichever you would like. Now, interestingly, if you do have an employer-sponsored health plan that comes out of your paycheck pre-tax each month, you can include a separate column there. Just for tracking purposes, but we're not going to actually include that in our aggregate columns, and I'll show you what I mean in just a minute. Because that's pre-tax, that's not actually coming out of your net paycheck every month. In other words, you never really see that money. It's just deducted from your healthcare plan through your employer. If you don't have an employer healthcare plan, then you'll want to include this probably as an includable column. And again, I'll show you what I mean here in just a minute. All right, so we're going to click the total expenses for the month and then click that little symbol sum. What we're going to do is drag all of our expenses that we want to include to calculate the total budgeted monthly expenses. Okay, and I'm not going to include that healthcare premium pre-tax column there. So you can see that cell that says $2,900. It just added up all of those $800 all the way to $60 from left to right. Okay, so pretty simple there. You can press pause and look at or rewind and see what I did there if that went too fast for you. But I'm going to actually color these red right now, or pink. This is my negative flow of money coming out, so all of my expenses, just to help these numbers in this graph pop a little bit. So next, what I'm doing in this column is I'm adding up all of my bills without my savings included. So to do that, you're going to hit that little sum column like you just saw, and then you're going to individually select the cells that you want to add up. You can do this by holding the Control button, or if you're using a Mac, the Command button. And what that's going to do is add up all of your expenses, but it's going to exclude your savings. Okay, just to give you two different numbers there of kind of all your money that's going out, including savings and not including savings. And you can obviously adjust how much savings per month that you want to make and play around with those numbers a little bit. All right, so next up we're going to build a little colored graph at the bottom of this little budget here, just to give you an idea of how much money is coming in every month. And so in this graph, you can see I like to focus on the net income, right? So after taxes have already been taken out. And I like to calculate that based on myself and based on my spouse, just so I can see how much money is coming in per month that I have to work with, again, after tax. And then I can multiply that by 12 to see kind of how much money I'm dealing with per year. And I can also put in a per year gross as well, because everybody should know how much they approximately make gross per year, right? So you can have those numbers as well. All right, so with that little graph built, we're going to go back up to our budget, and you can see in Q2, we're going to actually calculate how much money we have left after we have paid everything, including our savings, okay? So to do so, you can enter the formula. We're basically going to do a little subtraction there. You can press pause and see what that formula was again if you missed it. But this is going to basically tell me that I have about $750 left over at the end of each month. And I'm going to do the same thing in the next cell here. And this will tell me how much money I have left over at the end of each month with my only my bills, not my savings included. Okay. Now I'm going to make these two columns green. Just for the sake, green leftover cash flow is generally positive, so green light, red light kind of concept there. And you can see how visually appealing this is starting to become. Not a professional graph by any means. I am not an accountant, but I definitely like the way that this thing looks and operates visually and practically. All right, so with those columns built now, and you can kind of generally see how much money's coming in, how much money's going out, how much I have left over, etc., I can start to track my monthly expenses as they come up. So maybe the first of the month you have your house payment or your rent payment due. You can go into your Google Doc here, or your Google Sheet document, and fill in $800. And then you saved $200, so good job this month, or the first part of the month anyway. And then so on and so forth. And again, you can see how my budget is a little bit higher than maybe my actual expenses. Now this may vary, right? For example, in the winter, if you use your heater a lot, then your gas will probably be higher in the winter months, right? Whereas electric might be higher in the summer months because you're running your air conditioner more, for example. Now, interestingly, if you right-click any cell and add Insert Note, you can kind of track individual charges as they come up. So maybe you have $156 in gas total for that month, and that is comprised of obviously not one specific charge, but various charges, filling up the car several times, for example. Then maybe your food bill went over quite a bit for the first month. That's okay. You can adjust these later. This just gives you an idea of where your money is going and how much you're spending, right? All right, so we're going to get technical again for just a minute. We're going to be entering some formulas. So we basically want to copy and paste that formula that was in O2, okay, and spread it down through all of the cells below. So to do that, you're just going to right-click the cell O2 and copy it. And then you're going to click and drag all those cells and then paste it. And guess what? All those numbers are going to automatically adjust depending on the row that they're in for you. So super easy. Go back and press rewind and pause if you need to. We're going to do the same thing for the green columns. We're going to copy that base cell and then we're going to paste it in. However, the green column is going to have a problem, and we're going to fix that because the green column is basically incorrectly assigning a cell, and we want to just make sure that that is the correct cell. In other words, we don't have $42,000 left at the end of each month. I wish, right? So there's clearly an error there. And so to fix that, it basically is you need to enter, in each of the cells, you need to enter a specific cell number. So what I mean by that is, if you go down here to B23, it says how much money per month is coming in net. So B23, that's the measurement number, or the cell that we need to be adding. So watch what I'm doing here. I'm just clicking on each cell and I'm going to switch out that incorrect number. It says B25, and I want to make sure it says B23 for all of those. This is going to make sure it subtracts the correct amount or the correct cells from one another. Okay, so as I do that, you can see the number now is correct. For my months that I have not spent anything, I have all of my monthly net left, which makes sense, right? If I'm bringing in $3,800 per month net, then if I haven't spent anything, then I should have $3,800 per month left. Okay, so that's what I want to do. So again, I'm just going to go through here and get rid of that incorrect cell, and I'm going to add the correct cell, which happens to be, in this case, B23, like bingo. All right, and now I'm going to do the same thing for this other column here. I'm just going to reset that number again, making sure it's using the total net cell. Okay, so obviously on your computer or your system, you're going to want to make sure you correctly input the cell that you have there. It might not be B23, for example. It might be something else. So make note of that. That is important to get an accurate measurement there. All right, so now we have all of our data, our technical data entered. It wasn't that bad, was it? So good job there. Again, go back if you need to follow along if I lost you there. And we're going to just select all these numbers and select currency, okay? Here it is one more time. If you don't like the hundredths place, we can click financial and change all those to rounded financial numbers. So it has a dollar sign on each one and nice clean numbers because we don't really deal or need to deal with cents, in my opinion. We're just kind of ballparking. This is not a specific exact science, so I don't really care about is it 52 cents or is it zero point zero 0.02 cents, right? So I just want clean whole numbers there. All right, and so we will continue as time goes on to be inputting our expenses in the appropriate place. So you might have to do this every time a bill comes in, or you can certainly wait till the end of the month and then enter it one time, or have an app on your phone that's handy to pull up as they come in. I find it easier to stay on top of this type of job versus saving it toward the end of the month when you have to track down, okay, how much did I spend 29 days ago on my electric and gas bill? Where is it, right? So as they come in, I pay the bill and then I enter it into this Google document pretty religiously, I would say. If you forget this, if you forget to do it, if you skip several steps, it's not the end of the world, but it's definitely going to negatively affect your numbers and your measurements from that. All right, so we will continue here, and let's imagine that we are nearing the end of our second month, for example, February, right? And we're starting to see some patterns emerge now in terms of how much money we are spending each month, how much we're saving, and how much money we have left over. Oh, there was a little error there. Fix that. And you can see I'm in the green, right? Like I'm not negatively spending. And the beauty of this specific budget form, if you are spending more than you make, it will give you a negative read there. All right, so now that you have a couple of months of entries, we can start to now turn to looking at how much average per month we're spending on each expense category. So earlier we entered the word average, and you just saw me click the average symbol and then drag my mouse over all the cells that I want to average. Okay. Now I'm just going to copy all those over, and what that's going to do is tell me what my average is for each category. Okay. So you can see in this example, my average per month expense for my rent or my house payment was $800, while I only averaged $175 in savings for those 2 months, even though I budgeted for $200. Okay, so that data is really nice to look at to see kind of how much on average you are spending as time goes on each category. Okay, we'll do the same thing for the sum because it's nice to see how much per year you're spending on your house payment or your rent payment, right? So to do that, we'll click the sum symbol and then we'll drag all of our months. Now notice I'm dragging my cursor over the blank months too, because I want those to be included as time goes on. And then I'll copy and paste that same formula into those existing cells. All right, we should have done this earlier, but I do want to encourage you to enter a percentage cell right there, as you can see, percentage of your yearly income. This is nice to give you an idea of how much percentage-wise all your money is going on which category. So to do this, it's pretty simple. We're going to basically look at this sum cell in B16, and we're going to divide it by how much money you're making in net yearly. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to enter my cell B16 divided by B24 in this example. Oh, and you do not need a parentheses anywhere in this. Just equal sign, your cell, and then a divided symbol divided by your other cell. Now, we do need to change this number, not from a whole number to a percentage. So let me do that across all of the cells there so it actually reads a percentage. And you can see here I've spent so far 3.15 of my total yearly income on rent or house payment, which is kind of a nice data point, right? And as time goes on, that number will of course increase. Okay. So here's what that can look like. Now I do need to change my cell formula to B24. It copied incorrectly one of those cell numbers, so let me just switch those out. You can go along with me here just to make sure it is reading, dividing that correct number, right? If you don't do this part, it will give you an error sign. As you can see here, that div divided by 0 is not what you want. So I'm just going to switch that cell number out for each of those columns. And by the way, you only have to do this one time. in future years and future budgets. If you have this correctly inputted, you only have to do it once, and that's it. So obviously, it takes a little bit of time to do up front, but trust me, it is worth it. All right, so now we're going to imagine a whole year has gone by. We have a full set of expenses and data that we've input. In our example, we have lots of similar numbers, but yours will probably vary, right, depending on month, depending on what's going on in your life. Okay. Now, I absolutely love the end result of this. We're a chance where you can look back at the year and reflect and say, okay, how much have I spent on each column or category, right? It gives me averages, it gives me total dollars, total numbers, right? And that's a great thing. And I can also see my yearly, the percentage of my yearly income. So I spent 21.5% of all of my income per year, per that year, for net, right? My net income on a house payment, for example, or my rent payment. And so that's really nice to see kind of, wow, where is most of my money going? And what maybe did I underestimate as well? All right, going over here to this column, you can see how much money I spent. So how many bills did I have excluding savings and including savings as well. So for this example, I had about $33,000 total of bills for the year as I've identified them on this document, right? Now that doesn't necessarily include like credit card expenses or other places your money might be going, but again, it just gives you an idea. And including savings, I've spent about 36,000 per year. And if you subtract those two numbers, or if you add up those two average, or excuse me, the sum columns for the savings, you can simply see how much you saved per year, total dollars. And so that's kind of a nice thing to have, especially if you're serious about building your savings, your emergency money. And so, if you're not happy with that number, then you can next year, you can increase and work to increase that number. If you thought you saved too much, you can obviously bring that down. But whatever your circumstance, it's nice to have that number looking right at you. All right, so where do we go from here? Obviously, we can learn a lot from the data, but more importantly, we're going to be using it to build our next year's budget if you're interested in looking that far out. So as the end of the year approaches, you can create a new budget. And here's the great thing: you can see how I just did that, by the way, right? Press pause or go back and look at that again. But I'm going to delete all my data, but I'm going to keep all my other cells inputted, so I don't have to actually enter all those formulas again, those nasty technical formulas that we did already. And we're using last year's budget. I'm going to go back, I'm going to look at those average categories, and I'm going to determine, okay, based on last year's expenses, how do I want to plan for this coming year, right? So for 2021, I can look at that and say, okay, I spent X amount, and I want to adjust the new budget to X amount, okay? And again, I encourage you to overestimate versus underestimate your expenses. Aim high, round up, so that you can be a little more conservative in your numbers. I think look a little healthier. You'll be probably more pleased, right? As opposed to underestimating. So just a recommendation there. Take it or leave it. So I'm going to start to just copy over my numbers and modify them according to my anticipated expenses for the new year. And that is how it works. So with our new numbers adjusted, we'll obviously come back. Now certain things change, right? Like healthcare costs go up. So I might have to make adjustments to expenses that go up with inflation. I'm also, based on my paycheck, I'm going to reflect on that to see, oh, okay, I got maybe a raise this new year. So I'm going to make sure all my income is updated accurately as well, so that these numbers reflect accurately. So just kind of just throwing some numbers in here. For example, imagine you're making a little bit more, so you can modify those numbers as such. All right, so once you're happy with everything, you can go back and just kind of compare and kind of look. Now, obviously things come up in life. If you do need to add an extra column or expense at any point, you can just right click and click Insert Column, right? And for example, if you had no car repair expenses last year, but this year you had, your car battery go out, and then you had I don't know, some major expense. Well, you can, plan for and enter those as they come up. So again, it's kind of an adaptable, flexible document that may change depending on circumstances and life. And so you can just go through here and do the same thing like we did before, and just add and your numbers up, and copy those formulas into the cells as shown. Now this again can be done with the previous year or the current year's document, however you want to do that. But that's the idea, that you can add and get rid of columns as life happens. All right, so that is basically it. Looking forward to the next year here. We have a nice clean slate. We can start tracking our data once again and all of our expenses and savings as they come up. And it's as simple as that. Thank you so much, and I hope this video has been helpful to you.